If we think of polyolefins, the two main drivers for polyolefins are polyethylene and polypropylene. And the operating rates for some of these plants have been under 80, for polyethylene has been under 80% in the past year. And they are also expected to stay lower. Some of the reasons for that is not just the declining demand, but also overcapacity in China. And if you look at North American operating rates, they've fallen from above 90% in 2019 to under 85% in 2024. If we think of what the next year would look like, we do expect that they may improve, but it also will be dependent heavily on what the demand looks like and what some of this announced capacity in China would look like. We are seeing similar situation in polypropylene, where they stood slightly above 75% in 2024. The reasons are similar, where overcapacity and moderate demand. We all know, we've talked about this in the last 2 days, is that EV demand has slowed down. And a lot of the polypropylene that goes into those industries has seen the mild demand in the past year. Increasingly, if we think of the growing geopolitical tension and the trade disruptions that would result from them, will again impact the operating rates going forward. So when we think about global PE demand and what the outlook would look like, we still expect some growth, albeit at a slower pace. If we think of the key applications that are driving this demand, obviously packaging, which is film and sheet, is driving the demand, and also rotomolding, which is driving this demand. A lot of it is coming from applications such as automotive or ship boats and things like that. So if we think of the demand and the slowdown, we see that historically China has had a very big impact on global demand. If we think of in the past, even the year, say in 2023, where the actual global demand fell short, China was 175% of the demand growth in that year. So that we see that is how big of an impact China's economic slowdown could have on demand for some of these polyolefins. If we think of the capacity in the US, we are only expecting CP Chem's Golden Triangle that has a definite start year for 2026 for ethylene and polyethylene that is expected to come online. However, the only two other announcements from Motiva and Formosa have no definite date on when they would be starting up. And there's unlikely that there's going to be any more announcement, at least in the medium term. So, sorry, this does paint a grim picture, and I would invite the panelists to kind of say that it's not all that bad. So, and I'm going to give it to you so that you can introduce what Braskem is doing and how do you see what is exciting for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I hope you can all hear me. So my name is Kalfus. I'm representing Braskem here at this forum, and thank you for the invitation. It's such a great meeting. It's such a great pleasure to be here. So just to kick off kind of this session, or part of the kickoff, I brought a few slides. It's going to be only 5 minutes, not more, on kind of one of the horses we have in the race, in the polyolefin race. And, you know, we heard a lot about the fossil polyolefin market. It's going through some really hard times, and you know, this is kind of one of the horses that's kind of helping us to get sort of, you know, kind of battle the curse of the cost curve, right? It's race to the bottom, and this is kind of the opposite. It's race to the high margin and a really good, you know, high growing business. So I'll cover that a little bit. Let me see if I can move it forward. So just kind of first, let's put it into the context of Braskem and what Braskem is doing and kind of what is really our strategy. What is our strategic goal really? And it's carbon neutral circular economy. You know, we typically hear these debates to be kind of separate. Either we talk about carbon neutrality and decarbonization, or we talk about circularity. in Braskem, we consider both at the same time. There are two loops on circular carbon. One is through the waste management, right? You bring the waste plastic back to the production cycle. The second loop that we have at the same time in our mind, maybe it's even more important, is closing the loop on the CO2, on the carbon that's in the air. And you need to close both loops at the same time. So that's kind of our aspiration. So our aspiration is to really create a carbon neutral circular economy, and this is kind of one of the ways to do it. So what is green polyethylene or even polypropylene? And I'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. So green means carbon negative. It's carbon negative for every ton of green polyethylene or biopolyethylene. You take 2 tons of CO2, about 2 tons, a little bit more, from the air. Okay, so essentially it's a biogenic DAC, direct air capture, right? You let the sugarcane or corn to take the CO2 from the air through photosynthesis and through biogenic processes, and then we take that sugar, turn it into ethanol, and then turn it into ethylene and polyethylene. One thing that's important to mention here, and we heard in the previous sessions yesterday and before yesterday, I think it was yesterday, about carbon capture and some of these decarbonization processes and technologies and their costs. This is a way how to hack the system, right? In DAC, you're combating the penalty of entropy, right? Mm-hmm. CO2 is only 400 ppm in the air. Here we use the plants to do it for us essentially for free. Well, it's not completely for free, but it's a very low cost. Okay, and then we harvest that and we turn it into a chemical. So that's kind of our approach here. It's fully segregated, no mass balance, it's fully segregated, it's traceable, right? This carbon has different nuclear signatures, so you can do NMR measurement at any point during the lifetime of the life cycle of the product, and you can measure how much of the biogenic content you have. And it's polyethylene, so it can be circular, it can be recycled exactly the same way as any other polyethylene, right? The fact that it's biopolymer doesn't mean it's biodegradable. So it's been a long journey, 15 years since we started the plant down in Brazil. We extended the capacity. Just my previous team expanded the capacity of the plant by about 10% by better catalyst utilization. So over the 15 years, we've really built efficiencies and scale. And now we have multiple ventures on our plate. So there's the Braskem CM venture, which is in Thailand with SCGC, and we are working on the bio-based polypropylene venture here in the US. I heard last year you had Citronic here talking about similar project. I think we are better than Citronic, but we will see. Certainly they are our competition in this space, so but a kind of friendly competition. We know Citronic very well. So this is kind of where we are right now. Very quickly, 2 slides just to finish. I know, I get it. It's on your mind right now. What is the food competition? What's the cost, right? That's always the question. Look, Braskem has very strict sourcing program when it comes to ethanol. Our ethanol is coming from sugarcane that's grown in or on degraded pasture land. So that's a land that's not used for food production. So the sugarcane is really used for recovery of the land. So that's where our ethanol is coming from. So the effect or the competition with food is minimum to none. In terms of the land use, it's 1%. We can build 10 more ethanol plants and it will still be a little drop in the bucket. We are really stealing ethanol from the fuels pool, not really competing with the food. The second is cost. So yeah, it's ethanol. Ethanol is 40% water, 60% ethylene. So the stoichiometry is clear, right? You are turning an expensive molecule into 40% no value, right? And then ethylene. So it will always be more expensive, but it's offset by a great premium in the market. It's fast-growing market with good premium. So it's really good business to be in. So, and just to close, Braskem is a client-centric company. We have really covered the whole spectrum of grades just to support our clients, to make sure it fits in all of their applications and all of their specifications that they need. So I hope I made you a little bit more excited about green polyethylene before we jump into the conversation. But looking forward to the discussion, and certainly happy to talk about fossil polyethylene as well and polypropylene.
Thank you.
So should I hand it over now or no?
Ricardo, can you briefly introduce your company and what are the projects that you are currently working on?
Okay, thank you for having me here, Panuswee, and thank you for the Braskem introduction. I think it's really exciting how you introduce a new product in the market that is more sustainable and it has lower carbon footprint than the one that we are used to use here. Then Plastilene Group is a 68-year-old company. We have been one of the leaders in the flexible packaging industry in Latin America, and we are now in the US with a production facility and research innovation center in Ohio. Braskem has been one of our suppliers in Latin America here, but we also work with different suppliers as LyondellBasell, Dow, Exxon, and some others. We work mainly for food packaging industry, and we develop sustainable solutions based on recyclability, recycled content. We have some bio-based. We tried the green polyethylene some years ago. Right now, the main barrier is the cost, as you mentioned. Maybe European markets or high-end markets are paying for this markup, but in Latin America, it's really difficult to find customers with the willingness to do this in big markets. And then here we are introducing new solutions. We are one of the few that are trying to change paper for plastic. We have some solutions based on 100% polyethylene that are replacing materials like multi-materials that are plastic, that are paper-based, but also have some coatings or wax or some other materials. In that cases, plastic is not just better for greenhouse emissions and other LCA impacts, but also in recyclability, because these kind of materials are not recyclable. We work strong in innovation and sustainability are our key drivers. And I think right now our challenge is how to move fast in all these new technologies. It could be bio-based solutions, it could be chemical or advanced recycling solutions. Also PCR solutions, mechanical recycling have been growing, I could say exponentially. And with all the major suppliers or all the major petrochemicals working in one of these solutions or multiple solutions, I think we are prepared to move faster and quicker to the next step and provide the market with really sustainable solutions and hopefully cost-effective solutions.
That's interesting, thank you. So, Ricardo, when you said that you are moving from Latin America now to, say, North America, do you see any major changes, say, in terms of what your feedstock should look like? What does the value chain look like? Or how supportive is the market for, say, some of these sustainable feedstocks?
I think that the petrochemical industry is a worldwide industry. Then we use same suppliers in the different regions. Most of the feedstock comes from the US in the regular or normal petrochemical industry. And the sustainable solutions comes from Brazil, that is the green polyethylene, or comes from US, the advanced recycling facility that Exxon and Lyondell both have. Or now, same suppliers are working on low carbon emissions products that I think is key. The green polyethylene is already a low carbon solution. It's negative carbon footprint, but also in a massive way, some other suppliers are working in a low carbon solutions that I think will impact strong the market, because the brand owners are looking for low carbon emissions packaging and then also for recyclable packaging. But they are prioritizing low carbon than recyclability, even both are really important. And they change a little bit their perception over plastic solutions. Some of them is still having goals to reduce plastic, but they are now more focused on lowering carbon footprint and increase recyclability. And in the US, as I mentioned, we work with the same suppliers. We see different streams for PCR maybe, but it's something that is challenging in the US. We need to increase the capacity and we need to involve maybe the end users about how to dispose the packaging and the materials in the households, but also the streams, the waste management, they have to give some value to those materials, because right now, for example, flexibles is a hard to recycle material. The MRFs don't have, they don't assign value to these materials. Then we struggle getting APR letters for flexibles. But there is one trend that we see is coming, and is increasing the recyclability of flexible packaging, even for high barrier materials or high-end materials for food contact.
Thank you, Ricardo. I do have some follow-up questions, but before that, Jan, if we go one step up in the value chain from him, and for your people that you supply to, how do you see the balance between their expectation of a bio-based versus, say, a recycled material, so like a PCR polyethylene?
Yeah, so I kind of agree with everything you said, and we see similar trends in the market. I would say the market now is learning that circularity is much more difficult to achieve, and there's multiple sort of choke points in the value chain. Aggregation is still it's still a challenge, and it's great to see some of the developments. LyondellBasell and Exxon, progressing some of these ventures sort of more upstream. But yeah, it's kind of a problem. So what we see in kind of downstream among our clients is more focus on carbon footprint, and it's kind of benefiting us with our products. And as you said, South America is a little bit difficult. They kind of struggle to pay the premium for that. Europe is different, Asia is different, especially Japan, Korea. US is still a little bit kind of a question mark, especially with the new administration. We'll see how the support and potential regulations, will evolve in that space.
But if we think of Europe, and the regulations on single-use plastic derivative that are going to now hit, that require certain percentage of PCR content in every packaging, how is that going to impact what you expect
that would help, because that would, that pressure, depending on, what the sort of the carrot and stick sort of approach would be. But, if there are some penalties on our clients, obviously, that makes our situation much better, because then we can ask for higher premium, and we can, recover some of the costs that are associated with investments in this area. In circularity, if I can maybe, digress maybe a little bit, I think it's important, in the circular space, I think we as an industry struggle a little bit, because, there is a lot of hype and sort of pressure on building these small pyrolysis units, and the return on investment is not great. I think we as Braskem, at least, I don't want to say, pyrolysis is not a viable business, but here in Braskem we have much better investment opportunities than building a pyrolysis unit. So I don't think you will see Braskem. I'm not a decision maker. It's our CEO, Roberto Ramos, but I don't think we will ever build a pyrolysis unit in Braskem. I think what Exxon is doing, maybe just one last comment, just because I was in Exxon before, and it was my project. The Baytown recycling project was my baby. And it's great to see that baby turning into a toddler, maybe now a teenager, and it's really doing well. So, it's like, as you see your kids doing well, so you're really happy. So I'm really happy for Exxon that this project is great, is doing well. Actually, this project was killed, by the way, and we kind of resurrected that project when I was in the office of the president of Emery. So that's the way to do it. How Exxon is doing it, right? You don't build a pyrolysis unit. Don't do it. Why would you do it? You have a refinery. A refinery has so much pyrolysis capacity. Just in Texas, if you look at how much pyrolysis capacity is in refineries, you could recycle, 3 times around all the plastic waste that you have at the U.S. Gulf Coast. So why would you build, a pyrolysis unit if you have, delayed coker, flexi coker, or even fluid catalytic cracker, behind the fence, already at scale, zero investment, minimum investment.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So Ricardo, if we go to your point of view in this recycling value chain, you do mention that flexibles are not given the same, they're not as compatible with some of these chemical recycling or mechanical recycling technologies. Have you, and what Jan mentioned is the issue of aggregation. Do you see some of these pyrolysis oil companies coming to you to directly, say, source industrial waste rather than a post-consumer waste? Whatever waste that your plants could be generating to be used as a source for pyrolysis.
What we see right now is that both technologies are going to coexist in the future. That is the advanced recycling and the mechanical recycling. I see both capacities are increasing, and right now mechanical recycling was the first one and the most widely adopted, and the one that doesn't impact the cost. Then it's easier to adopt for the brand owners. We already have many applications with PCR content in Latin America. And now in the US, we are presenting those that are FDA approved, that in the case of HDPE, that is a really good advantage when you can produce FDA approved resins coming from post-consumer materials. But for example, we have our own PCR facility in Colombia. We work with all the value chain and the supply chain to get those materials from the waste, because we process materials from households, but also from post-commercial materials and post-industrial materials, post-consumer industrial, and all of them can be classified as PCR. And in this case, we also see regulation, that was the question that you made before to Jan, pushing and supporting all the development of PCR infrastructure and applications. In Colombia, we have a single-use plastic law, and this law was in place the year in July 2024. And right now, our PCR facility double its capacity. We were 50%, right now we are 90%. Occupy. Then legislation will push the use of these materials in the economy, and we see this legislation as a global trend that will have kind of unification, because if you are a company in Colombia, in Central America, Mexico, or Guatemala, or in the US, and if you want to export to the European Union some products, you have to compliance the regulation in the European Union. You have to compliance the regulation in Canada. Then you have to adopt this regulation, even that is not your local regulation. I think Plastic Treaty is going in that direction. It will take time, but the implementation that some markets have done with these plastic use regulations have unified the actions in the brand owners that are also globally located. Brand owners like PepsiCo or Unilever or Nestle, then they have the same policies in all markets, then at the end, all these solutions will support the compliance with the regulatory frameworks globally and locally. It could be chemical recycling, as you mentioned, that I think is growing and will be available in higher scales, and also mechanical recycling.
Thank you, that's helpful. So if we switch a gear a little bit, a lot of this bio-based or recycled is going to be some portion of the, say, fossil-based polyethylene, polypropylene chains. And so how do you see, and if the virgin prices keep falling and they're much lower than what some of these bio-based or recycled look like. So how do you see the market for, and where do you see market growing for some of this, say, non-recycled or non-bio-based polyolefins?
Yeah, so what we see in the market is, now it's primarily voluntary market. So like you mentioned, global brand owners, that's really, that's the core of the voluntary market. So it's about their decarbonization targets rather than the price or cost of the material. I mean, cost is, there is kind of a saying, the most important mechanical property of a polymer is cost. So cost is, is really, really important. But, building brand value and protecting the brand value, sometimes is more important than, say, cents per pound here or there. So what we see is global brand owners willing to pay premium, more or less. The different brand owners have different sort of threshold, but we see that market to be growing, be fairly strong, and at least on our end, I think, it's been a great story, and it's been kind of decoupled from the fossil market, and it's related to bio-based. It's related to recycled, circular things like those.
And you mentioned brand owners. So is that mainly packaging, or do you see other applications also where you see growth?
Yeah, I think the main battleground is in consumables. So packaging is, the biggest part of that. Now in terms of opportunity, actually durables are a great opportunity, especially if you think about it as a sequestration, right? You can make, you can use polyethylene, and this is maybe a little bit of the frontier. I don't think this is much in the market, but I think that's kind of emerging and, getting into the thoughts of people down the value chain. What if I make the brick from polyethylene? It kind of sounds crazy. Or but what we do today is polyethylene pipe, right? If I use this, say, bio-based, or if I do like Dow is doing the Saskatchewan project, which is kind of net zero. It's not negative, but net zero. Maybe they can do net negative in the future. It's a good way to sequester carbon. You put it back into the ground in form of pipe. You can use it in construction. So those are some of the things that are kind of emerging. But yeah, where the battleground is today, it's consumables. It's film packaging. These applications, and some countries have regulations already emerging. There may be something in Europe, but certainly, Japan, Korea, some countries in Asia are much more ahead. And, you can see sort of once you put regulation in place, it affects the demand, right away. And it makes the prices a little bit healthier for us. So, we can, it's when we talk about sustainability, it's not only the environmental sustainability, but also the commercial sustainability, right? Because we need to invest money, and things are expensive, very expensive.
Of course.
So, Ricardo, where do you see the market growing in terms of, say, applications or regions globally?
Yeah, cost, of course, is a challenge. And with the market situation right now, that is more difficult to implement the sustainable solutions, because virgin resins are really in the lower side. If virgin resins were 20% higher, I'm not going to accept any increase, but if virgin resins were 20% higher, maybe PCR could be included quickly in the solutions, for sure. But also the instability of the prices, because today are cheaper, maybe will be 20% higher, but maybe in 6 months are again lower. Mm-hmm. Then that is difficult to handle with the customers, and it's difficult to make investment with that level of uncertainty in the table. Then we think that is the most difficult challenge, the cost, but regulations are helping us to overpass that kind of barriers, and also the global brands initiatives are doing this. And one important thing is that almost every big petrochemical company, all petrochemical companies are big right now, but almost all of them are working in sustainable solutions. They are investing in PCR, then they have to sell this. We have to find a way to implement these sustainable solutions for the good of the industry. And we will find the way to do it. That's what I think.
That's helpful, thank you. So I do have more questions, but I'm going to open this up for the audience if there are any questions. So while the audience thinks of questions, if you think of, Marcos mentioned yesterday that, the ways you could reduce carbon footprint would be either, say, sustainable energy, or like renewable energy, or say sustainable feedstock or bio-based feedstock. So as Braskem, who's trying to do both, which one do you think, medium term versus longer term, is the most sustainable? And as you mentioned, right, in both ways, environmentally as well as economically.
Yeah, so, and I think what Braskem is doing is probably what any other company is doing in the industry. I think in the short term, I mean, it's always a mix of different solutions. So, we talked about bio-based polyethylene, but certainly we have other solutions in the mix, CCS. Here in the US, especially in Texas, a big part of the short term is, PPAs and RECs. So, renewable power purchases, that's a big deal in decarbonizing the industrial sector or, manufacturing, especially when it comes to scope 2 emissions. For scope 1 emissions, it's a little bit harder, and I think CCS will have to be deployed. I think CCS, I used to be a kind of, maybe I wasn't fully convinced in the past, but now actually I'm a big believer in CCS. I think CCS is ready for the big moment. And it's going to happen, and it's going to happen, partially because we need CO2 for EOR. So, we are, I think, a little bit opportunistic here, I mean, as an industry, and as, as the chemical and petrochemical and upstream sector in the US. So, these things will progress. So it's, PPAs and RECs, it's in the very short term, because you can buy it today. In Texas, it's very cheap because there's such an overcapacity, and it's probably going to stay like that for a couple of years. So certainly for the short term, a big deal. I think most of the companies can meet their decarbonization targets just with RECs and, PPAs. And if they are bundled, even better, and it can be sort of marketed. And I think companies are doing that. In the midterm, CCS, certainly I think it's going to take off. And, we certainly are happy about, what Exxon is doing and other companies. I think the space is populating fairly well. And I think there's going to be, kind of a healthy competition, in that field. The bottleneck is probably the midstream. So I'm assuming, the pipeline, owners probably will make good money when it comes to, CCS and decarbonization. And, in the very long term, in terms of feedstocks, I think we will see decarbonization upstream as well. For us, what's, scope 3 emission for us is, scope 1 and 2 emission for somebody else. And I think we heard yesterday about some of the, or maybe it was the day before, about some of the efforts in Canada to decarbonize oil sands. So I think we will see something similar even with NGLs here in the US. And most of the NGL, emission is really coming from electricity and, utilities. You have compressors and stuff. So again, it comes to renewable electricity. So hopefully we'll see more renewable projects in terms of photovoltaic and wind. And that's going to help to decarbonize the whole industry down the road.
So, and Ricardo, in your experience, you mentioned food packaging, or even in terms of, say, battery and those kinds of materials. From your consumers, are you finding pressure to say lower your emissions so that they can reduce their scope 2 emissions?
No, they are pushing for scope 3. We are a carbon neutral companies. We use mostly renewable energies in our operations. And we find availability from our customers to hear about these initiatives, about how can we improve our impact also in our products. We are working in carbon zero products, net zero products or carbon neutral products to sell to our customers, and is an increasing interest from them in these offers. Then and something that they are also bring more attention is about the LCA results, mainly the carbon footprint, but also some of them are looking to other impacts, water consumption, resources, and I'm seeing conversations coming about LCA methodologies. How are you calculating that result? How you are proving that this is well done and it's not just your information with your team. We need third parties involved in these discussions and peer review LCAs. But I'm seeing these conversations coming to decide over what packaging I'm going to use and not just paper or plastic. If not science-based conversations and regulations.
So, I think there has a question.
Yeah, this is a question for you, Ricardo. There's a big shift towards use of monomaterials, for example, for different packaging applications, film applications. Do you see push from customers in Latin South America around that as well?
Yes, I see. Customers are demanding, but more than monomaterial, that concept has changed a little bit, is design for recyclability materials. Because it could be even materials with barriers or something, but if you can show them that those materials are recyclable, you can get the APR certification or a letter of objection, or they are interested to use that kind of materials. And I mention this because sometimes it's difficult to get monomaterials for certain application when you need barriers or some other performance from the product. Then the trend is there, it's increasing, but monomaterial is converging with the design for recyclability concept.
I have one more question, if that's okay. Jan, so a lot of great progress on green ethylene, and the concept makes a lot of sense, right? But what about, Braskem has assets in countries where you don't have access to the same feedstock, right? Low CI ethanol, for example, right? So in those assets, would you, what's the role for pyrolysis or broadly speaking, how do you think of recycling for production from those assets where you don't have access to that ethanol?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question, and when it comes to feedstocks, it gets quite complicated. So maybe let me address it maybe a little bit broader. Braskem has a lot of kind of conventional fossil crackers down in Brazil, right? In the US, we don't have crackers. We more have polymer plants. Well, in Mexico, we have a cracker, and then Europe is kind of small. So when it comes to feedstocks in general, there is more transition to NGLs rather than naphtha. It's kind of sort of building upon what you said. Now, in terms of the renewable feedstocks, there is export from Brazil. So, everything's tied to Santos and, Esalq and Santos, both. So, you export. So when it comes to, for example, venture in Thailand, right, it's a kind of combination of exports and local ethanol. Now, I think US is a great opportunity for future ethanol projects because we have corn ethanol. and we have a constant push for lower CI, so it's improving. In terms of the cost structure, I think it looks great, and I think I showed it in one of those slides. I didn't mention it explicitly, but we have a bio-PP project happening in the US, so we are moving towards FID. Like Citronic. Actually, we mentioned that. So that's that. When it comes to circular, it's more about feedstock purchase rather than feedstock production. Braskem, I think Braskem's bet, and I think it's a good bet, is integration with trading. So we have a big trading organization. Actually, it's a successful trading organization. It's making money, and it's a big revenue stream for Braskem. And one of the emerging areas in the olefins and polyolefin space is actually there are now, circular and biorenewable feedstocks is a tradable commodity now, right? There is a market with an established pricing. It's getting into Platts and into kind of the standard channels, and we have traders who are working in that area. So Braskem is not only using the feedstock but also buying and selling and making money out of that. So it's kind of when it comes really to the future in the polyolefin industry, right? It's not only to focus on cash cost and working capital and really stay disciplined, but also looking at how can I extract values, squeeze penny from the whole value chain. And feedstock trading is a big opportunity. If I could go back in time, I would be a trader rather than, what I'm doing now. There's more money to be made.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I will be real quick. Coming from the clean tech investment background, I've seen a lot of companies, over a dozen companies in North America and Europe, trying to enter into recycling of plastic markets. Some technologies want to produce hydrogen and graphene using the recycled plastics, and while others are trying to convert CO2 and hydrogen into the plastics. I would love your thoughts on this perspective, especially the new technologies, and how you feel that these technologies will unfold in next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to cost and return on investment, right? Just speaking of Braskem, you look at Braskem, and Braskem is a chemical company, and you think that we are excited about chemicals. Yeah, we are, but in the first place, we are essentially bankers who are investing money in the petrochemical space, and we are here to make money in the first place. So it's great to be excited about these technologies, and I know what you're talking about, and me as an engineer, I'm really excited. Especially you mentioned kind of the pyrolysis, where you can actually extract the carbon in a solid form and then sequester it. I think that sounds very attractive. But I think we have much better investment opportunities at this point. It may change in 5-10 years. Things may progress, but I touched on using refineries for circularity. It's fantastic, phenomenal return opportunity, right? Because those are existing assets. Your capex is 10 to 20 times lower versus when you build a new pyrolyzer or you need to build a new plant, right? This is kind of a brownfield, investment, minor brownfield investment versus a massive greenfield investment, right? I think somebody talked about it yesterday here. Somebody mentioned, they are purchasing distressed, old assets. I think I forgot the name, but it was one of the first panels, and they, I think it was in the power generation space, and this is the same thing, just use what's already existing, use the steel that's already in the ground rather than build new one. That's how you make money. And in the end of the day, we need to make money.
I'm intrigued by your comment about using pyrolysis. I guess what you're saying is existing crackers that could be used somehow for recycling, or can you explain a little bit more about? You said there are world-scale pyrolysis already on the ground that could be used. Why would you build small-scale recycling? Why not use the big ones?
Yeah, so let's look at the Baytown project that Exxon launched, right? And it's all from public domain. So it's essentially pyrolysis of plastics and flexi coker. That flexi coker has been around for decades, right? It's a pyrolyzer, and that's how you do it. Why would you? It's the same essentially. In principle, it's the same technology. It's a thermal pyrolysis, the same as you would do in a process that you can purchase from Altera or other companies, right? But it's already existing. So I'm not talking about steam cracker. I'm talking about a coker, coking units, delayed coker, flexi coker. You can use visbreaker. You can use fluid catalytic cracker, right? So we have different cracking and pyrolysis units in refineries that already exist. Now you may be asking, hey, Jan, why are you saying that? Why don't you keep it for yourself? Hey, we want refineries to do it. We are ready to sign an offtake agreement. If you as a refiner want to do it, fantastic. Please do it. We will help you. We will tell you how to do it. And if you want to go into relationship with us, we are more than happy. Now, in terms of IP, it's all expired. Freedom to operate. Anybody can do it. So why not? So let's spread the word.
Okay, that's helpful. So before we close the panel, I just want to ask to both of you, what is something that keeps you up at night? And if you can share some of your closing thoughts.
Thank you. No, I think how to move quicker, how to bring solutions faster, and make it real in a scale, in an industrial scale. Right now, for example, we also, another component in the market situation is that we are seeing a lot of merge of huge companies in packaging. For example, Amcor and Berry and Bemis before, and some other merge in Transcontinental and other. All of them are coming bigger and bigger, and I think they will be difficult for them to be quick implementing solutions. Then if what we are looking for is those spaces in the market where you can bring solutions quicker and customizable to the customers, where few people can do it. Then that keeps us awake.
That is an interesting point of view.
And innovative solutions to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so what keeps me up at night? Maybe what keeps me busy during the day and then up at night. So our 3 projects I have on my plate right now, and I truly believe those are, and maybe before I do that, let me build on what you said. How to do things faster. I would add to that, and I 100% agree, how to do it faster and how to do it cheaper. So reduction of capital intensity of projects. It's a big deal. So, number 1 project is the BioPP. So we really want to make it happen and kind of trying to find ways how to do it. And the capital intensity and reduction of the capital intensity is a big part of it. Then circularity. So how to work with refineries to do the circular economy for us, or participate, so that we don't need to build these expensive pyrolyzers, and we can do it with something that already exists, and we don't need to spend as much money. And hey, there is a big incentive for the refinery to do that. There's lots of money to be made. There's a lot of meat in those projects. So that number 2 and number 3 is CCS. As I said, I'm a big believer of CCS. That is a lot of work. CCS is still at the beginning of the road. And I mentioned trading. I think there's a big opportunity for CO2. You have Braskem has actually, we have our own ships, and, so you're hauling ethane one way, why don't you haul CO2 the other way? It's not a drop-in, you need to rebuild those ships, so there is some capex, related to that. But, how to establish the circular economy, kind of in the broader sense, circular even in terms of emissions, right? So if I'm sending a ship with ethane to Veracruz, in Mexico, how can I bring the CO2 from the cracker back to the US so that I can sequester it here in Texas and get the IRA 45Q credit for that? So things like those. So, how can you squeeze the penny, from across the value chain more efficiently, how to do it cheaper, how to really make money out of sustainability, I know it's strategic. I think we said that with somebody here, so it's going to be my last comment. When somebody comes and tells you, "Hey, this is strategic," you know immediately you're going to lose money. Okay, if something is strategic, you will never see your money again. So, let's more align with our strategic goals rather than work on strategic projects, and let's make money together. That's kind of our vision in Braskem.
Thank you so much. Very interesting points of view. So thank you so much. With this, we end the panel. Thank you to the panelists for your views.
Thank you.
Thank you.